And now allow me to welcome former Israeli parliament member for the Likud party, Yehudah Glick, president of the Shalom Jerusalem Foundation, Ofer Cassif, member of the Israeli parliament, the Hadash party, and Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves, Jonathan Conricus, former international spokesperson for the IDF. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us this evening. Well, Hamas was very quick, almost automatic to claim responsibility, but Mr. Conricus, it seems to be a classic lone wolf attack, and as difficult as it may be to say it or to hear it, some attacks just cannot be prevented. No intelligence can intercept what's crossing between a man's two ears, right?
It is very difficult to protect against that, and I think the previous story with the civilian who ended the attack is really noteworthy, and I'm happy that such a cool-headed and abled mind and bodied person was there at the right time to stop that Palestinian terrorist, who, by the way, was in Israel on humanitarian grounds as a fatally ill person who was supposed to receive treatment in Israel. And unfortunately, I'm sure that will affect many other just cases of people who need medical treatment in Israel, and will make it more difficult for them to be treated in Israel because this Palestinian chose to attack Israelis. About Hamas, I think that they're getting a very small yield on their investment being tremendous amount of incitement in social media, in mosques over the last months, calling on Palestinians to attack, calling on Palestinians to take arms in their hands and to attack Israelis or Jews wherever they can find them. And unfortunately now we see this attack, but I think that Hamas aren't really happy with that outcome, and for sure they are hoping for a much broader uprising and more terror attacks against civilians.
Well, we will dive further into that later on in the broadcast, but let's do circle back to what we've heard from National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, this civilian that you just mentioned, Jonathan Conricus, who neutralized the attacker using his own personal gun, reigniting the discussion over civilians carrying weapons. Mr. Yehudah Glick, more guns, more safety, or the other way around?
I think that it's important to understand that today, while our friends in the United States are celebrating their Independence Day, July 4th, and we were very happy for them, Israel is also an independent state. And with the message is very clear. There's no safe haven for terrorists. And Israel is making that very clear. And if any terrorist comes to Tel Aviv, we know how to protect ourselves, and we will do it. Better if it's done by the security forces, but if not, if it's done by civilians, that's also important. We are here, and it's a wide consensus. The fight against terror is almost down the road, and the Israeli consensus.
Mr. Cassif, briefly, please, before we need to take a break, your take on civilians carrying guns?
I am totally against it because it's very clear, we know it from all over the globe, that wherever there are guns, they are used. And they are used not only when it is, as it were, necessary, but even and more so when it is not. This is one thing. But I must say something as a comment to those who spoke before me, that the civilian who shot today the Palestinian who did a terrorist attack, we are against it. We are against harming civilians, innocent civilians.
Mr. Cassif, we have to take a break. We're back with our panel, Mr. Yehudah Glick, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, and Mr. Ofer Cassif. I do want you to continue from the point we stopped before the break, but also referring to what we've just heard from our peer Chandler. No other way to put it. Is the Gaza Strip is the West Bank rather turning into the Gaza Strip in terms of one round of fighting following the other?
Two things. First of all, as I began to say before, in regard to the killing of the Palestinian today in Tel Aviv, and I emphasize again that we are against any harming or any targeting of innocent civilians. Therefore, of course, by definition, we opposed what the Palestinian did today in Tel Aviv. But the civilian who shot him is actually is an assassin because he's a murderer. Because he shot him after he posed no danger to anyone.
Mr. Cassif, he rammed his car into
I saw the videos, and after he shot him once or twice, when he posed danger to others, he was lying with no posing any danger, he kept shooting him once or twice. That's a murder, according to the international law as well. Now, as to your second question, we should refer to the general context. The general context is 56 years of brutal, murderous, sadistic occupation of the Israel over the Palestinian people in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza Strip, which is under siege. This is the cause of the bloodshed. This is the cause of the price that everybody pays, especially the Palestinians, but also we within Israel. The only way to stop the bloodshed is not by posing or by threatening or by invading time and time again the Palestinian towns and villages, but only by ending the occupation and establishing an independent Palestinian state alongside the state of Israel. No other way. No other way. And those who argue that there is another way are either fanatics or liars or both.
Lieutenant Colonel Conricus.
Yeah, I don't think the previous speaker's words really are really worthy of comment. I'd like to focus on your question and speak about the situation in northern Samaria. Sorry, I didn't intervene you, even though you were saying heinous things and supporting terrorist activity.
I wasn't talking nonsense.
Fine. Listen, I don't interrupt others, and I expect to be given a few seconds without interference. Thank you, sir.
Gentlemen, you know, we encourage interaction, but let's please maintain respect, please.
Yeah. So regarding the situation in northern Samaria, I don't think that anybody really is surprised in Israel that we are now in the middle of this operation, because it has been brewing for quite a long time, and terrorists have been able to gain that presence and stronghold in northern Samaria, specifically in Jenin, but also in Nablus, and the writing was on the wall in that sense. And that's why when you ask if northern Samaria is becoming the Gaza Strip, well, definitely not. The reason being that the IDF is there and there are Israeli civilians there. Had that not been the case, like in Judea and Samaria, like in Gaza, then I'm sure that the IDF would face a very, very difficult situation in combating terror. And if you look at the Hamas statement of today, calling civilians in Tel Aviv, which by any political agreement is Israel, internationally recognized Israel, and shouldn't be thought of as differently, calling those settlers and justifying murder of them, really tells you the story of what we're looking at. So I think it's a clear situation, and I'll leave the rest of the time for our next speaker.
Mr. Yehudah Glick, please chime in.
Thank you, Jonathan. Very much appreciated. As I will just continue in saying, Prime Minister Netanyahu and the IDF Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi, said clearly, we're going to continue as much as necessary to cut off terrorism. And I think this sentence is very important. Israel is not invading Jenin because we want to establish any kind of Jewish settlement in Jenin, or we want to capture Jenin. As a matter of fact, Israel has an agreement with the Palestinian Authority to allow independent life there. What Israel is trying to do is protect our civilians. And it's very clear, and even Ofer Cassif knows very clearly, that if the Palestinians would put down their ammunition, Israel would not be there. Israel does not enter the Palestinian cities anywhere. And the Palestinians have turned down any offer. So Israel is here to continue fighting terrorism, which even Ofer Cassif agrees are something that must be condemned and must be stopped. We're going to continue fighting terrorism as much as necessary to allow the Israelis to live here freely and not to be attacked in restaurants by people who come in shooting, and not to be run over in the streets of Tel Aviv. That's the very simple message. We're here to live. We're here to live side by side with the Palestinians if they want to. We're here to protect ourselves if they decide to fight against us. We're not going to bow down and accept any kind of terrorist behavior.
Mr. Cassif, please.
Yeah, of course I disagree with Yehudah and the other speaker. I don't remember his name.
Mr. Conricus, yeah.
Because look, there's no living side by side as long as occupation goes on. I want everybody to remember that the terrorists are mainly those who carry on or carry out the occupation. The main terrorists are the settlers who set fire into villages, houses, fields, and shot innocent Palestinians just in the last week in Turmus Aya, in Urif, in Bet Furik, and in many
Cassif,
other towns. They are the terrorists. So in order, if someone wants to get rid of terrorists, and I support that, that means to get rid of the settlements. Those should be dismantled totally and go back home. That means into the sovereign borders of Israel. And alongside Israel, in the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem, an independent and a Palestinian state should be established and live. That's the only way, as long as there is an occupation. Look, history shows there's no one example, especially in the modern world, in modern history, of people who lives under occupation and do not resist. As long as there is occupation, there is a resistance. You don't want resistance. Actually, occupation. Those who carry out the occupation are the terrorists and are the criminals.
Ofer Cassif, as you know, you're right. History proves, just like we walked out of Gaza Strip, and Gaza became the Singapore of Middle East. You know, we only had to...
Let me correct you, my friend. Let me correct you.
No, Ofer, let me finish,
Let me correct you because you're not accurate.
Ofer, listen carefully. You know very clearly that I visited Singapore many times, and Gaza does not remind me of Singapore. Uprooting settlements, we've tried that already. Uprooting settlements brings more terror. And uprooting settlements brings Hamas to take over the Gaza Strip. We are not interested. We're not interested in the Gaza Strip near our airport and near the center of Israel. We're not interested in bringing Gaza.
Neither do I. That's not the point.
So therefore, we've tried it. We've given it a chance. We uprooted completely from Gaza, and Gaza became a jungle. No, we're not going to go back to that. We're not going to allow to go back to that, and we're not going to give it a chance. We are not guinea pigs. We're not guinea pigs, and we're not going to allow the Middle East, the Judea and Samaria, to become a Gaza to kill our children.
And correct your mistakes. Let's go back to the disengagement plan. The Likud party as a whole, the party that Yehudah is a member of, Netanyahu, who then was the finance minister, they all voted yes. They supported the disengagement plan. My friends in Hadash, I wasn't a member of the Knesset then, but my friends in Hadash then did not vote for the disengagement plan. They opposed it and abstained in the vote at the Knesset, in the plenum. Why? Because we foresaw the future then. We said then that Gaza will not be free, and therefore the south of Israel will not enjoy peace and quiet if there's no dialogue and agreement with the Palestinian leadership. Because let's everybody remember, the disengagement plan was a one-sided project. It was not a product of a dialogue with the Palestinians. It was actually to subvert the dialogue with the Palestinians.
You're 100% right, and therefore,
that's the reason. We said that 20 years ago.
Gentlemen, and we will continue our dialogue right after the break. Welcome back to the special broadcast here on I-24 News. Initial reports indicate the IDF forces are currently leaving Jenin after 2 full days of the counter-terrorism operation there. Again, initial reports. We will be bringing you live updates from the field once more information is available. Back with our panelists here, Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserve Jonathan Conricus, member of Israeli parliament for the Hadash party, Ofer Cassif, and Yehudah Glick, president of the Shalom Jerusalem Foundation, a former Israeli lawmaker for the Likud party. Lieutenant Colonel Conricus, as it seems, at least, that the operation is coming to a close. What are the measurements tools here to assess success?
Well, on the get-go, the IDF and the State of Israel communicated quite clearly what the operation was about: to kill or apprehend terrorists, to extract information, to deal a blow to their infrastructure, and to take away military capabilities that terrorist organizations in Jenin have been able to accumulate over time, and perhaps most importantly, to take away that false sense of security of having a safe haven in Jenin where terrorists could live in and attack Israelis from. It appears, according to all the measurements, that at least majority of those goals have been achieved, and that is probably why IDF commanders are taking the decision to go back and to end the operation, at least for the time being, knowing that the IDF will enjoy freedom of movement and the ability to continue to operate and operate tomorrow or the day after tomorrow if necessary, having sent a clear message to terrorists, to the Palestinian Authority, to Hamas, and also a distant message to Iran that whenever terrorists get established in an area and think that they are safe, if it's close to Israel, Israel will get to it and take the battle to them. And I think that's an important message, especially for Hamas in Gaza and its supporters in the area.
Well, in this respect, Ofer Cassif, is it fair to say the Jenin operation is in the Palestinian Authority's interests?
No, I care about the interest of the peoples, both Israelis and Palestinians. And as I said before, the Jenin invasion, as part of the general occupation, is a war crime. Israel has been committing war crimes time and time again, especially under this fascist government. And I refer to this invasion, and we can see some pictures, but there are even worse pictures of this invasion. This is a terror attack. This is an invasion that was not legitimate from the very beginning. And as I said before, that this is only another layer and part of the ongoing occupation. And as other occupation ended, alas, too often after too many years and too many victims, this occupation will be over too. I hope that the sooner the better.
Okay.
But to say that that serves the interest of the Palestinian Authority, I do not accept that. As long as if the Palestinian Authority serves or tries to serve the Palestinian people, so obviously they must be against it. And I imagine that they are against it, like I am.
But Mr. Cassif, your dismay of the Israeli government and military operation, very well heard. So what would you do in this situation where you see spiraling violence, terror attacks day in, day out?
As I said before, the terror attacks are mainly by the settlers and the Israeli occupation forces. We just saw in the last week or so how many times pogromists and bigot thugs invaded Palestinian villages and set fire, etc. The only way to solve the problem and stop the bloodshed of both Palestinians and Israelis is to dismantle those terrorist and illegal settlements and to finish totally ending the occupation. No other way. That will happen. The question is, what will be the price that Palestinians and Israelis are going to pay till then?
Mr. Yehudah Glick.
I believe that those who benefit most from the operation in Jenin are actually the Palestinian citizens. Mass majority of the Palestinians living in the Palestinian cities in Judea and Samaria are not interested in people using their mosques to accumulate ammunition. They're not interested in the fact that their hospitals should be used as shelters for terrorists. And they're very excited to see Israel entering and cleaning out those terror, because these people want to live and make a living, and they want to live in peace with their neighbors. Just like And I think that this is the most important thing. Of course, Israel will benefit from it because Israel wants the place to be peaceful. And the fact that the Israelis are walking out apparently now shows that Israel wanted something very clear. We wanted the people to understand that our tolerance should not be misunderstood. The fact that Israel didn't react immediately after the first 100 terrorist attacks doesn't mean that we are ignoring it and we're not indifferent to the situation. We are clear, and we made the message very clear. And therefore, the entrance of Israel to Jenin was extremely important. And therefore, the Palestinians who left their houses and are now hopefully will be able to come back and live peacefully, knowing that Israel is there and will stand on their beside to make sure they can live freely and peacefully and not allow those armed forces who are attacking Israel and also bringing suffering to the Palestinian civilians.
And yes, at the end of the day, the question of motivation remains intact, as we are seeing youngsters with scissors carrying out terror attacks. Whether this operation is curbing their motivation to do so remains to be seen. Lieutenant Colonel Conricus.
Yeah, I think it's important that we don't get our facts confused here. The IDF and ISA and police launched this operation because Israelis have been attacked by terrorist activity emanating from Jenin. We didn't go there, or the IDF didn't go there to enhance the quality of living of Palestinians, as benevolent as that may seem. The hard truth and reality living in Israel is that many Israelis, whether they live in Judea and Samaria or in other parts of Israel, and Israeli soldiers are attacked by Palestinians perpetrating attacks. And against that, you have to defend yourself and fight. And you can, spin it any way you try. But that is the basic reality that we face here. And we just got the last reminder a few hours ago of civilians getting run over, stabbed by a Palestinian terrorist. So let's keep focus on what's going on here. And I think that unfortunately, what we're looking at is just one out of what appears to be a series of incursions that the IDF will have to do into places where the Palestinian Authority chooses to withdraw from, not to implement its responsibilities under the Oslo Accord, leave a void for the various terrorist organizations and extremists to take hold, and then Israel has to go in and defend its civilians from there.
Not the swan song, that's for certain. Mr. Cassif, before we wrap up our conversation, perhaps an opportunity to circle back to a statement you made earlier that keeps on resonating. The civilian who neutralized the Palestinian perpetrator in today's terror attack in Tel Aviv, you dubbed him an assassin.
He is an assassin because, as I said before, I want to be very, very precise and accurate. And you can see it if you watch the videos from the scene. Because after the Palestinians was already shot down and didn't pose any danger to anyone, this guy continued with shooting him. That's an assassination. That's a killing. That's a murder. Because nobody can say that if someone comes to kill you and harm you, you don't have the right to protect yourself. Of course, you do have the right. But that's not the case. Because after he was shot down, the civilian kept shooting him. That's a murder.
Okay.
Look how deteriorated the Israeli society. How the moral deterioration of the Israeli society, by the way, due to the ongoing occupation. About 30 years ago, there was a case of a Palestinian who stabbed people in a Machane Yehudah market in Jerusalem.
Yes. Mr. Cassif, unfortunately, we will save this one for our next conversation. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Hey, I see you liked it. Want more? Just hit the subscribe button right here. Go on. I know you want to.